President Trump just showed exactly how far he's willing to go to protect our gun rights.
You are fake news.
That's what we're going to look at today. A big step and another one of these not really headline grabbing things, but something that is equally as important that I want to cover today that will help to stem any kind of gun control that could be brought up in the future during his administration or any period in the future, really. So he's kind of making these moves that help to future-proof us and shield us essentially against gun control on the federal level at least. And so that's what we're going to look at today. I'm going to tell you exactly what he's doing. And I know there's going to be quite a few people, maybe even gun owners out there that look at what we're talking about and they're going to be like, dude, I think this is actually a good idea. But today I'm going to tell you why this is a terrible idea and you do not want anybody looking at this. Of course, I want to hear your opinion down below. Let's go and jump right in. So what are we talking about? Well, Trump directed the Surgeon General to actually remove gun violence as an epidemic, as a health advisory in the United States. Remember, this was added on last June by the current Surgeon General, and so they could comply with the second 2A executive order, they now have to remove it. Now, the Surgeon General and their work goes back a really long time, and there's some things that they've worked on that have been beneficial, but you're about to see why it's such a problem when it comes to studying the effects of gun violence. So let's look at some of the things they've done in the past. Cigarettes, right? That used to be, according to their statistics, like per capita, an annual per capita was like 53 cigarettes, and that jumped up to like 4,000 per capita in 1963 before they initiated their warnings on labels, which came up at 64, and I think by 1970 roughly they had to start putting that Surgeon General warning on every pack of cigarettes. Now, one study I saw, and this all comes from the New York Times, by the way, an article that I read that kind of summarizes all this stuff, so I'll make sure to leave that down below. But essentially in 2002, 20% of the population smoked, and now it's like 11%, I think, going back to like 2017. So it's definitely gone down. And you've seen like this culture shift, right? You watch old movies. I love old movies, and they just have a different feel to them, whatever. Especially old horror movies. Anyways, you watch old movies and you'll see like people smoking on a plane. And you're like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. You see the light come on, like the seatbelt light that comes on, once they're high enough in the air. I can remember a time where restaurants had smoking areas. It was kind of funny because the doors would be wide open to the non-smoking area, so it really didn't mean a lot. And of course, this stuff has all pretty much been phased out anywhere you go now in the United States. Keep this in mind as we're talking about it, okay? So in reality, you're like, okay, a lot more people are actually being saved and they know the risks of cigarette smoke. I've lost relatives from heart problems and smoking, okay? So it's one of those unfortunate things that are super highly addictive, and yet people have been able to cut down off of them. Drinking and driving. This was another thing the Surgeon General brought to the spotlight. 1983, I think, was the year when they did a study basically that showed 25,000 people a year were losing their life in drinking and driving. Now, as of 2021, and I may have some of these dates a little bit skewed, but roughly about 2021, it was like 13,000. They made mandatory, blood alcohol levels. They set those in place in '83, and of course, it's gone down ever since. There's actually a really funny old video that I've seen so many times. I'll pull it up for you right now.
Some is downright undemocratic.
It's kind of getting common is when a fella can't put in a hard day's work, put in 11, 12 hours a day, and then get in your truck and at least drink 1 or 2 beers.
They're making it laws where you can't drink when you want to. You have to wear a seatbelt when you're driving. And pretty soon we're going to be a communist country.
Pretty soon we're going to become a communist country. It's like the lady's hilarious. But there's always resistance to this because it's like, okay, now the government's telling me that you can't do this, right? And drinking and driving is a terrible idea. And unfortunately, a lot of people still lose their lives because of it. Video games. This is one that was brought up in the 90s. I think actually in the 70s, the Surgeon General started talking about television and kids. And then late 80s, early 90s, it was video games, violent video games, and how this negatively affected kids. Even though no study has really shown that, maybe it affects some of them out there. But look, I grew up playing video games, Mortal Kombat, all this kind of stuff. My children have too. Pretty much everybody I know grew up. We grew up in like the prime time of gaming, essentially, and we all played games like that. And you know, GTA, Mortal Kombat, there's a whole slew of them now. Call of Duty, GTA 6, maybe, if all the planets align, and maybe as soon as Elon Musk actually builds a city on Mars, we're probably going to get GTA 6, maybe at that point. So anyways, side note there. But regardless, that's another thing that they went after, to try to restrict that. And then you had ratings on the games that kept some kids away from them. Now, again, the research has shown to be pretty much inconclusive when it comes to kids and violent video games, or even watching movies. So you may be thinking, well, you know, most of this has led to less people losing their lives. Cigarettes, drunk driving, the video game one is stupid, just an example though. So isn't that what you want? You want less people losing their lives. And to that I say, of course we do. The problem is they don't even start the conversation off being intellectually honest. And what I mean is they will say, okay, there's upwards of 50,000 lives taken because of guns in the United States, conveniently leaving out the fact that the vast majority of those are people taking their own lives. Now that is a problem, right, that I think we should absolutely look at, but that's a part of the mental health problem that so many of us try to focus on, right? I believe, and this is just my personal belief, you may agree or disagree, but I believe mental health should be funded 1,000% more than what it is. I believe the stigma around mental health, and especially mental health in men and in veterans, needs to be brought to the forefront. If you have something going on, you should be able to say, I'm going to go get help for this. There's no reason that I'm not going to go talk to somebody, medication, whatever you need to do to be able to kind of get out of your own head. I am a big believer that mental health and those issues should be talked about and explored way more than what they are. And the stigma, 100% removed from what it is. That's a big one. So if you have 50% or over 50% of people taking their own lives, well, then that leaves us with things like gangs, accidents, and other things, right? So that number drastically comes down. When you say 50,000 a year, you're like, oh my gosh, it's way too many. The problem is what they want to do with this research, because there's some independent researchers that will do this kind of studies, and they will say, oh, well, you know, we're looking at, you know, if you had less guns, more storage options, less types of this kind of gun, then your problem is going to be eliminated, or it's going to be significantly reduced. The problem is everybody's comparing it to this 50,000 number, and not in reality what it actually is, which is significantly lower. And they're trying to basically say, at the end of the day, more gun control equals less people's lives being taken out of that 50,000. Again, conveniently forgetting that the vast majority are people taking their own lives. Regardless if they have a gun or any other way to do that, it's irrelevant. The gun is a tool that is a part of a right. It's not just something you can say, oh, less guns, less types of this gun, more storage means we can restrict that right, which is essentially what they want to do. Even if they say they don't, it's part of the problem with this whole conversation, because that is the end goal. They want to reduce the amount of guns. They want to say, hey, because of this research that we've done, we think this gun should be restricted. You should no longer have it. You have to buy a safe. You have to keep it locked away, meaning when somebody breaks into your house, you really are going to be at a severe disadvantage. Being safe and having your kids safe around your guns is your responsibility, but that doesn't mean the government coming in and telling you you have to do something with a right. That's where we draw the line. So by using federal funds to do this research, we know that the end goal is to basically, just like cigarettes and just like drunk driving, treat it like it's a privilege, not a right. Now, if they came in and they were like, look, we want to help gun owners, right? We want to help in the mental health problem that we have. This is the real number of people's lives that are taking, and they started it from an intellectually honest position, and they're like, okay, maybe we can teach kids in schools, firearm safety, have programs dedicated to that, where you not try to shield them from this stuff, but you show them. Majority of the time, that's where our kids are. Why can't there be programs that are funded that help teach these kids about that? Doesn't even have to be live fire drills, but you could actually teach them stuff like this. There's all kinds of education courses that schools will do that are really aimed more at adults, and why can't we bring that same level of education in something that is a fundamental right and treat it as such, instead of trying to use this research to strip people of their rights a little bit at a time. And I'll use this as an example, even though, again, it's a privilege compared to a right, but they started with putting a label on cigarettes. Then it was no smoking on planes. Then it was no smoking in restaurants. Then it was like, you're pretty much shunned. If you're smoking, you're looked at differently, right? If you're smoking outside of an establishment, right? There's whole cities that have banned smoking anywhere near an establishment in certain areas, right? So a little bit at a time, they've chipped away at it. And that is exactly what they want to do with firearms, even more so. And they basically stripped the CDC funds to look at gun violence and study it because of this exact reason, the Dickey Amendment. Right now, he later said on in 2015 that he regrets that any of this happened because it was gun control, which was the main issue, not being able to actually research it at all. But that's why he did it in the first place, because being able to research it is going to lead to your rights and my rights restricted at the end of the day. They just want more ammo, for lack of better words, to use against you and your rights. That's why we're opposed to it, and this was a fantastic move by Trump to actually remove this from the Surgeon General and the government's ability to create another form of gun control. That's my opinion, though. I'd love to hear yours. Let me know what you think down below. If you like what I do, consider subscribing. See you in the next one. And as always, hold 'em down.